Hi, friends. I hope everyone's doing well.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yes, that is correct. This meeting is being recorded and also broadcasted live on Facebook. Ryan, I'm having a problem muting all. Actually, I found it. Okay. Okay, so everyone is muted. I hope, Don, you can unmute yourself. This meeting is being recorded and is also being live streamed on Facebook. So as I was saying, everyone is really excited here in this part of the world because of Morocco's performance in the World Cup against all odds. It's this small team, small country is actually doing great, is beating one of the biggest, already three of the biggest soccer teams. Tomorrow they're scheduled to meet one of the strongest teams in the world, France, and hopefully if they win, that takes them to the final match against possibly Argentina. So everyone's really excited because it's whenever Morocco wins, they're carrying the Palestinian flag, everybody's chanting in the stadiums, Free Palestine. So a lot of excitement for people here in Palestine. It's a time of good news being shared, given all of the challenges. But I tell you what's also more exciting is today's Kumi event. And we are both together, our good friend, Don Wagner. I have to admit, growing up in Palestine, I thought all international Christians were Christian Zionists or pro-Israeli. And the first book, I always tell Don, it's the first book that I read about Palestinian Christians in English or in Arabic, actually. It was his book. It was before I met him. I think the title is Dying in the Land of the Promised.
Yeah, that's it.
Don says I am the second one who has ever read this book.
Yeah, I think there's only 4 or 5. I can't even get my kids to read it, so.
I don't know that Sabil used to have a copy. We no longer have a copy. I don't know who has taken this copy. But I would recommend that somebody, I mean, if you get hold of this book, it's such an easy read. And I found it very informative. It's an excellent book. Maybe we need to translate it one day into Arabic, Don.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know if I'm biased, but maybe I need to read it again if I have a copy. Oh, here's Jan. You have another copy of it. It's a good book and very informative.
Well, thank you.
But Don is going to be with us. We have the pleasure that Don is with us. It's actually the third time I'm helping or I'm part of him launching a book. He was recently in Palestine. We did 2 book launching, one in Jerusalem, one in Bethlehem. It's in the middle of our intifada, it's a third intifada, I call it. Lot of tension, but we had the pleasure to host him and to have him with us. So it's a pleasure for me to be the third time with you, Don, presenting your book with, I think, the best title of the book could have, at least a Christian book, Glory to God in the Lowest. So thank you for being with us, Don.
Well, thank you, Omar. I always enjoy our time together, and you've been most generous with your time and your insights. So, I look forward to our conversation today. And that's it. It's a conversation, no lectures, and we'll try to keep everyone awake and take a lot of questions.
I wouldn't use this as a guarantee. We might turn it. Don has much information to share, and I'm sure we're going to try to use them, to use the time. So, Don, how many books have you already written?
This is the 6th.
And
none of them bestsellers, and they're under the radar.
But how many of the 6 are on Palestine or Palestine related?
All of them. Yeah. All of them. Yeah.
So it's that's amazing, Don. Your commitment. So it's What made you take the decision to write? I know you've been for a number of times since we've been talking. You said you're working on this book. Why did you want to write this book?
Well, it's kind of funny. When I retired as the program director for Friends of Sabile, I decided I'm going to write a, kind of an autobiography for my kids and just self-publish it for the family and a few friends. And my wife, Linda, who's a ruthless editor, was trying to get me to clean up my grammar and everything. But she said, there's a few stories in here I think you should try for a bigger audience. So I read up about what a memoir is. And a memoir is a more focused kind of writing on 2 or 3 themes in your life, not your whole life. So I had to drop all the funny fraternity stories and all the other stuff growing up. And what I decided to do was try to center the Palestinian narrative around liberation theology. But then I had to go into my background growing up in a Christian Zionist, very conservative Republican background, and the transformation I went through. And so that's one of the key themes, that transformation from very conservative Christian Zionism. And I was kind of apolitical until I went to seminary and encountered people marching at Princeton against the war. And my dad was a treasurer of the Republican Party and very pro-military and pro-Vietnam War. And I was converted in the process. And then I discovered at Princeton liberation theology and the civil rights movement. So within 1 month, within a year, I had changed to be more anti-war, commitment to nonviolence, anti-racism. And then my first church was a Black church. So that's another theme, the whole sense of anti-racism. And all along, this was setting me up, I think, for the Palestine issue. And I was, after Princeton, I was a liberal Christian Zionist, kind of a post-Holocaust theology and normalizing Israel. And I didn't really know the Palestine story. And the change came when I was a pastor, an associate pastor in a suburban church just north of Chicago. And we decided to do a series on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for adult study. And that's when a friend brought in a Palestinian. His name was Dr. Ibrahim Abu-Lughod. And I heard the Nakba narrative of him being forced from Jaffa. I'd never heard it. I was an avid reader of the New York Times, listening to National Public Radio, but I missed that story, that narrative, that history, and that began to scramble my narrative. And within a couple of years, I had visited Palestine, Lebanon, saw the refugee camps, and saw everything. And I saw the United States from a perspective of injustice, what has been done to the Palestinians and the rest of the world. So I was set on a journey. And I think it was Mark Twain who said, the greatest education is what we unlearn. So that's the process I was going through. That's why I did this book.
I mean, and actually it's very interesting that you started. I mean, you ended with this quote that it's difficult to unlearn. Why is it? I mean, I think it's a gift for people willing to admit that they're wrong or to change the direction. Very few people make this decision. Most people prefer just to be stubborn and just to cancel the argument of somebody else or not even willing to listen to somebody or to a different perspective on a special on something. Why? I mean, the book is filled with stories that shows that you were willing to listen, at least to a certain. Doesn't mean that you were comfortable always, but what made you willing to listen to things that are different from what you have been taught?
Well, I think I think my experience in the Black church, where I was working in a church on weekends. In seminary you do what we call field education. So I wound up in this Black church, and I was forced to look at my white privilege, the race issue, and these people were really loving me and gentle with me. And then I saw the racism, the systemic racism, the poverty, and I just saw another side of life. And then my narrative on white privilege was being scrambled, and I had all these people caring and loving me and moving me along. And then I find in the Gospels, reading Howard Thurman, Jesus and the Disinherited, Matthew 25, where were you when I was hungry? Where were you when I was thirsty? When I was a victim of poverty because of my race, my Blackness? And my narrative shifted. And the same thing then happened on Palestine. When I heard about the Nakba, it just scrambled my Christian Zionist. I had long left the fundamentalist Christian Zionism. Now it was a post-Holocaust liberal. And I'll always stand against anti-Semitism, with the correct definition, that is, not the IHRA. But I will always stand, and I did when Nazis marched in Skokie, just outside Chicago. I was there, standing with the Jewish community. But then, I began to see there's another grave injustice. And when I went to Beirut, saw the refugee camps, and also saw the amazing hospitality of the poorest of the poor, it just really touched me, and it moved me further along in the shift of my narrative. So I think it was just a combination of life experience, beautiful hospitality of the victims, and to see these are the people I really need to hold up and be in solidarity with and learn from. They have a lot to teach me. So it was kind of a multiplicity of things that just cracked open. But I think the shift in narrative is key.
I mean, it's for the people who logged in the meeting earlier, Don, we were joking, and whenever we meet, we try to joke, Don and myself. We pretend that we both have a good sense of humor. At least both of us agree on it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we were talking about, like meeting Christian Zionists. And I mean, it's today when we meet groups, we meet the blessed Christian Zionists. And I mean, in a way, we share the Palestinian narrative, but we also share the Palestinian theological answers, the questions and the answers that we provided. When you were introduced to the Palestinian narrative, let's say, or the Nakba narrative, I don't think at that time there was already a Christian theology that was developed on it. So you were part of, you had to also find answers on your own.
Well, it's there were Christian narratives, and thankfully I was taken in by, and I found them in Beirut with the Middle East Council of Churches. Gabi Habib, Father Paul Terzi. A lot of people in the late 60s were working under the radar on Palestine. Gabi Habib organized the first Palestinian Christian conference. And he had George Habash, Yasser Arafat, and many others there, but also some theologians that no one else had heard of were reading, particularly Palestinian theologians. It was there. So I got that perspective, thankfully, from the Arab Christians, Lebanese and Palestinian. Bishop George Choder, the Antiochian Orthodox Bishop of Beirut, was a brilliant theologian, Islamic scholar, but his perspective on Palestine was very strong. And this was something in Lebanon in the midst of a civil war where a lot of Maronite and other Christians were anti-Palestinian. But again, you know, when you see the camps, you see the poverty, and these people are loving you and caring for you. And then you read the Gospels, and Jesus went to the margins. He went to these people. He's the model. And the beginnings of liberation theology came. And then I met Assis Naim, eventually Mitri Raheb, and many others in Palestine. And they were the elements of a theology were there, and they were my teachers. So yeah, it was already present. You just had to find it.
I mean, it's today, if you're in Bethlehem, if you're even in Ramallah or even in Nablus, it's not that they're very common, but you will encounter many Christian groups who are coming and they're listening to the Palestinian narrative. Even like in international conferences, people are inviting Palestinians to come and speak at their conferences and to share their stories, even that sometimes on mainstream media. You went to Lebanon, and you have this section. I mean, it's in the book that speaks about your journey going to Lebanon. I think when Lebanon was like, it's a place you should not go, and I mean, and the Palestinians were literally the untouchables. How difficult was it for Americans to meet Palestinians at that time?
Well, I mean, we had them right in our neighborhood if you want to track them down. And so we had them here in big community in Chicago. So thankfully I was taken in by a number of them, and they were, again, they were teaching me, loving me, networking me. But then to go to Lebanon and those wasn't terribly inviting, but I mean, this is what we had to do. If you wanted to meet the Palestinian leadership. And so in 1982, I went 3 times with U.S. delegations and got trapped in the invasion in June, and then went back and experienced the Sabra Shatila massacre. Is my sound still okay?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay. And I think that was a huge lesson. I went into the camp with 2 American friends the day after the massacre ended, when they were pulling out bodies and pieces of bodies, and the survivors or the families were coming back the first time. And I've got a story in the book where I was just devastated by the death. We had to hold a handkerchief when you walked into the camps. You walk by the big the Israelis had taken over an apartment building, so they could see everything that was going in. They coordinated the massacre from this building and other posts. You were handed, as you walked in, a handkerchief, and they doused it with cologne because the smell of death and the 95-degree humidity was so intense, you would get sick. And the bodies were being pulled out. And I sat, I was overwhelmed emotionally. I've never before or since had such a close experience with suffering. And it was so unjust. And then you realize the U.S. signed an agreement when the PLO evacuated that the U.S. would guarantee the security of the Palestinian population. Knowing that and seeing what happened, as an American, I knew I was complicit just because I paid taxes. Later, I became a tax resistor for a while. But then I sat down to just kind of recover, and I was sitting next to a couple of French journalists who were crying, and a sheikh walked by, and we were sitting next to an open grave where they were carrying body bags, maybe 400 in one. And one of the journalists said, "Look over there, they're digging another mass grave." And then this sheikh walked by, and I ran up to him, and he was the imam of a mosque for Sabra Shatila. And he said, "Most of these people had been at prayer with me on Friday. Now look at what's happened." So I apologized. I said, "I'm sorry, I am an American, and the blood is on our hands." He said, yes, indeed, the blood is on your hands as Americans. But he said, my friend, I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful you're experiencing and witnessing this. All we ask, go home and tell the truth. Go home and tell what you have experienced and witnessed. So those are the orders. I've never forgotten that. That's part of what I've been called to do, to center the Palestinian case, center the suffering, and be in solidarity and continue to learn, but take the risk to tell the truth. And so that, I think, is that has been central for me, to be faithful to what that sheikh asked of me.
And I have to admit, Don, I mean, you've been doing this very faithfully. You've been sharing our story. Although you're the one who's carrying our story in many cases, you have kept our voices central. And I mean, and that's really beautiful. And that's sometimes very difficult, because sometimes people feel that you could redefine or rewrite our story in a way that would be better received in the US context, but you've managed somehow to keep our voices center. And while sharing or carrying our story, or our stories, if I might say, what did you find in your life the most challenging, the most challenges of people receiving the story?
Oh, wow. There's so many. I think I had to always be reminded it's not about me. I'm just a vehicle. I'm a servant. I'm a steward of sharing this injustice. So I always had to try to be conscious of that. It's not about me. Even in writing this memoir, I want to try to, it's my story, but the focus is Palestine and the Palestinians. So I have to walk that tension. And the resistance is on multiple levels. I found it in my own family. And my dear mother was an avid Christian Zionist, and she used to tell me, you're wasting your time on this Palestine issue. They've been fighting since Cain and Abel, and this isn't going to be solved till Jesus returns. So, it was that kind of a thing. Mom never changed, but my dad did. And gradually, I've been able to have a little bit of headway with some of the Christian Zionists. The resistance from the church was more painful, where people would simply just say, you're a voice for the terrorists, you're an anti-Semite, you're unfaithful as a Christian. So you just have to work through these things and keep yourself centered. So prayer and meditation reflection has been key for me to try to stay centered, but also to keep learning and learning from you guys. So the visits, the trips, the listening to the latest analysis, and try to be clearly focused on justice, and listen from to you, but also center your voices. And I always remember, I'm just a steward of the message. This injustice is is what I have to do my interpretation, adjust it to the American context, but keep you and your message, your struggle, the injustice you've experienced at the center. So that's been it in the Presbyterian Church. When I started, I was basically told, don't take on this issue because you'll be blackballed from the ministry. And eventually get to the point, well, that's okay. Other doors will open, and they did. But now look at the Presbyterians. We've, in 2014, after 10 years, we're able to adopt a version of BDS, Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions. And last year, a strong position on apartheid that needs to continue. And the problem is now we have to bring it down from the upper levels of a national assembly to the churches and the grassroots. And there's a tremendous amount of resistance, even to use the apartheid word. And of course, the attacks from anti-Semitism are going to come. And, that's okay. So you just have to stay the course, stay focused, and, and tell the story centering Palestine.
But in a way, you become also part of the story. I mean, you talk about how the church moved from fighting people, people who were carry the unpopular story until their eyes open and they make a decision. Universities, work, careers, activists, or the people who join our forces pay a high price, and you pay the high price. It was not easy for you. What is your advice about the cost of solidarity to people, and how do you address it in your book?
Well, I tried to face into it that taking on this issue is costly. But I'll tell you, I look out there and I see Daryl, and we go back to the late 70s as Presbyterians. And the people you meet, you all in Palestine, and then the people who are willing to take up this costly solidarity are quality. And these become friends, they become your support to continue the work. And I mean, just in the visits to Palestine, just to be there with you all, it's both refreshing, it's educational, but that solidarity, there's a bond that forms that is uplifting. And this is, I think this is the Holy Spirit at work. This is the church, not the institutional church, the real church. So that's there. And whenever I've paid a price, lose a job or be blackballed from this or that publication or even some churches, you know what your mission is. You've been asked to tell the truth, and it's doors keep opening. Another job comes available. When I lost my job at the university, Friends of Sabille opened up. That door magically or spiritually opened up. Then I could talk about anything without having to walk a tightrope from the Zionists or the administration. So it gets better and better. But just to be faithful is what we're here for. That we're called to be witnesses to the truth, witnesses to the gospel, and it's a higher mission than just you. And then you look at the price Palestinians are paying, and your little suffering is nothing in comparison. So all this fits together to just continue and to keep learning. And it's exciting to be in an adventure like this. So anyway, those are just a few random thoughts on it. But the broader network is what really, and the love, the solidarity, the costly witness, the price we pay is, it's all part of growing up, as a mature Christian. And I must add that I've learned an awful lot from my Jewish sisters and brothers, particularly those who are paying the price, and my Muslim friends. Islam has really deepened my own spirituality and a broader picture. So, all these things are, just a gift.
I mean, I'd also like to add one of the interesting things. Sometimes it's like I feel that it's the people who decide to take the difficult path to be our friends and to support the Palestinian people, and many people on the call would also echo, I mean, would feel the same. It's you get the pressure fighting, I mean, from your own communities, but sometimes like many people would call us and say, oh, this friend of yours, or I'm not sure if you should invite X or Y or Z because I know that he's your friend, but he does more harm to the cause than the benefit. And they try to divide, it's divide the connection, just showing that our radical friends are just too radical. And sometimes, it's pretty interesting. It's a very difficult thing to be in the belly of the monster, to be part of the Western world where most of it has been very aggressive towards the Palestinian people, and to decide to be pro-Palestinian. So, I mean, I think this book is very important because it helps people to understand the stories behind amazing people who get involved with amazing struggle, quality people, as you've said it. You, and I mean, it's many people on this call are quality people who have a community, and we're blessed to have you part of this community, Don. It's I'd like to also mention that you've said it in a beautiful way, that it's belonging to a community working for justice. There's no longer these walls of being a Muslim, Christian, Jew, black, white, brown, or whatever identity people have. We become one community. And you've been in so many different struggles that have really united people. How do you think that, how would you compare Palestine to other conflicts around the world, like into the anti-war movement, maybe within the African-American struggle, civil rights struggles? How would you compare the Palestinian struggle in building bridges among diverse groups of people?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, racism still is a factor in Palestine. And my experience in the Black church really is a very humble pastor trying to learn and be faithful, to the gospel, that everyone is equal before God in the Imago Dei. It's the same struggle. Now Palestinians happen to be vilified. Gay people are vilified. The blacks here, I mean, the struggle has never gone away, and it's all one struggle. And when you begin to see that, intersectionality is now a magic word, and sometimes we get tired of using it, but we have to be there for each other because it's one struggle. And I don't do enough of that now. I used to try to be there for the black folks and the gay and everything, and be out there in the street doing less of that. But now I think we're moved into another arena of collective solidarity in this being there for each other, whatever the injustice. And, it's, of course, in the United States now, it's going to be very difficult with the now with the new Israeli government and the normalizing that's going on with our president, our Secretary of State, where they won't even, they reluctantly pursue the assassination of Shireen Abu Akleh. And who knows how the FBI report is going to come out and cover it up. Now there's new pressures on the whole anti-Semitism issue. Not only do we have the anti-BDS law passing in several states where you can well, if you in various states, it's law that if you support BDS, you can your university will lose its funding, and therefore faculty are more at risk. And now there's new reports that Um, in some cities, the police and city councils are adopting an um, uh, an anti-Semitism position based on the definition from the Holocaust Foundation, so that potentially critique of what Israel is doing in Palestine will lead you to be fined and arrested by your police force. So it's accelerating. But then we have to see this in the context of just injustice of what we're called to do and pay that price, challenge it. And thankfully, we have groups like Palestine Legal, ACLU, and we have the Constitution and the First Amendment to protect us. But each case may have to be fought. So, like wise as serpents and harmless as doves, we got to stay centered, loving, peaceful, and just. But we're not going to cave in to the pressure. And as we draw from each other, from the Black Lives Movement, from gay, LGBTQ, now Hispanics, and now the Jewish community is going to, I think, be forced to challenge Zionism. And, we already have a number of rabbis and a few synagogues that are anti-Zionist, but it's rare. So we're going to have to stand with them together. And there's new opportunities, I think, with the Jewish community, with the pressures that are coming. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but just to say, these are new opportunities to be faithful, to challenge the injustice, and take us into a new day. And just when you think Palestine is being kicked down the road by the Trump administration and the Biden administration, we get something like the World Cup, where Palestine is as alive and central as ever. And even countries that have signed agreements with Israel, the people are with Palestine. And that's where we have to be. So that's another ray of hope. So God's work is alive in the struggle and injustice. But, it's going to be hard, costly. So we pay the price, we learn and keep growing, and our community expands.
Your encounter with Palestinian theology and Palestinian liberation theology, especially, you've been part, since I've been in Sabil since 2006, part of Sabil. Don, you've been very central as a main speaker in many of our conferences, as an authority, as a supporting theologian to Palestinian liberation theology. Could you speak about the relationship between you and Palestinian liberation theology, and where could we find it in the book?
Yeah, it's all through. And I got to say first, I'm not an authority. I am always amazed at how much I still have to learn and how much the situation changes.
We have placed you as an authority. You're not entitled to say if you're an authority or not. As Sabil, we have decided that you are an authority. So you have to accept it, Don.
Well, I just recommend you withdraw that word. I'm very much an activist. It's a mix of things. But Palestinian liberation theology has been very, very central to me. From the time I met Assis Naim and then Mitri and Jarius Khoury, who has gone on before us. He was one of the early liberation theologians. But my God, you look at it, and Jesus was a liberation theologian. The way we read the scriptures, it's all about justice, as Naim's book said, justice and only justice. And when my liberation theology studies were based on Latin America and so on, Central America, and to discover then from Naim a type of liberation theology that's biblically based, very much Jesus based, and reads the Bible critically and hermeneutically to begin to look at the different strands of literature in the Bible, some of which are very exclusive and pro-Zionist, you might say. But then the Bible critiques these texts within Scripture. And, to learn that, it's just totally informed my approach to the Bible, and just is a foundation of hope. Every day I start reading the lectionary, and then I meditate, and then I pray. And now I read the Bible in the lectionary through the eyes of Palestinian liberation theology. So I've been totally transformed, and it's been a gradual process. But my approach to the Bible is, totally informed by Palestinian liberation theology, and this critical look at the text. And somehow now we have to be on a mission to bring that into our seminaries. I found only 1 or 2 seminaries that have anything to do with Palestinian liberation theology, and how pastors who are trained have to look at these texts and critique the Zionist influence, not only in our texts, but in our hymns. That the Israel of our Christmas carols in Zion, it's not the modern state. The Bible has various meanings, interpretations of Israel, none of which is a modern Zionist state. So, but that isn't taught in seminary. It isn't preached in our churches. So this is a major mission we have. And so Palestinian liberation theology has helped even me as I sing the Christmas carols, or the hymns, or as I rarely now have the occasion to preach, but occasionally to teach in churches, to just move this hermeneutical liberation theology piece along to a deeper level. So it's very practical with people. And now so many are doing it. I just find new and younger voices who are really into liberation theology in Palestine, and connecting it with anti-racism. So it's very exciting, but it hasn't somehow gotten into our seminaries. I'll tell you, one seminary that does have it is Harvard. And a lot of us have to go and study what's going on there and transfer to our other seminaries. So, I mean, that's just kind of a random way of answering. But my life has been transformed by Palestinian liberation theology, my spirituality, my everyday reading of the lectionary, praying, and so on.
I think in the book you mentioned once stopping your car during a war and praying for the Israeli army to win, or for
Yeah. Yeah.
So you made a very big shift, because it's with Palestinian liberation theology, from praying for the oppressor or for the occupier to win a war, to praying, it is to see theology through the eyes of the people who are oppressed. So you made this shift with your does being on, it is in a way, I wouldn't call it, I don't know if it's right to call it on being on, although you admit in the book being a Christian Zionist, or being, it's closely sympathetic to Christian Zionism. I don't know, how would you identify yourself? Do you find that this helps you in engaging and opening the eyes or sharing the story, or it makes it even more difficult?
Well, I think, yeah, it's been helpful when I share my journey, and I see, a lot of people have had similar journeys. It's not unique at all. So yeah, sharing that and being really honest and being critical, both of I call it fundamentalist, not just evangelical, the fundamentalist Christian Zionism of the John Hagees, the Christian Embassy, this end time rapture theology, to share that I once was there. And then the one that's not talked about, Mark Braverman calls it Christian Zionism hiding in plain sight, the Christian Zionism in our mainline Protestant and Roman Catholic churches. We need to name that as Christian Zionist. When I share that yeah, in 1973, when I was driving across country to Chicago to take a new church, I was listening to the radio, and yeah, Israel was losing the war the first few days. I just saw a beautiful young lady, and you hug her. That's a lovely touch. Thank you, Omar. So yeah, I prayed for Israel's victory in that war. Then a month later is when I heard in the church for the first time a Palestinian talk about the Nakba and being run out of his home in Jaffa, never to return. Yeah, that shook my narrative loose. And but it took a while. I had to go see it in Beirut and see the injustice and the suffering until I was able to really say, yeah, I need to give a portion of my life to this. So I think it does help to tell these stories. You know, I think sometimes stories are more effective, particularly if there's a sense of transformation. But then you want to make sure it isn't just about you. Then you have to center Palestine and center the issues and take people to that next step of this is, you know, a tragedy that we as Americans and taxpayers have a stake in because we're responsible. And to try to get to that step is a more difficult level. But yeah, telling the stories and being honest about it and then centering Palestine is what we have to do.
I mean, it's occupations continue to happen around the world, with wars continue to happen, injustice continues to occur. How does it feel for somebody who has been involved with so many different struggles around the world? I mean, especially, and it's just see that it's not that we're solving all the issues, we'll continue as humanity developing new problems. What's your advice for activists?
Well, I guess, first of all, make the connections. And, you know, from wherever you are, if you're British, you've got a history of having a stake in creating this colonial struggle. As Americans, my God. And I think studying settler colonial ideology and liberation theology is a very helpful kind of journey to be on. And I try to talk about that in chapter 20 of the book, you know, how these two are brought together. And Michael Pryor was a key for me, Father Michael, a liberation theologian who had been a liberal Christian Zionist, was transformed as an Irishman, saw the connections with Ireland, and moved right into settler colonial analysis coupled with liberation theology to critique his own history, but then to embrace Palestine. So this was all connected. So I'd urge people. Something's going on with our. Okay, she's quiet. I think I'm being monitored by Mossad here. They're intervening in our little listening device. So yeah, I would recommend that people make that connection, settler colonial ideology with liberation theology. And unfortunately, I don't know how to turn this thing off.
Don't worry, it's the more who listen to this conversation, the better.
Yeah, so liberation theology, settler colonial theology, but then find what your gifts are. Maybe it's writing, maybe it's street activism. Find what your gifts are and find a community so that you're not alone, so that you're doing this together. It can't be done alone. That's why I made such an emphasis on the collective. And then be in solidarity with the local people who are struggling. I mean, if it's in Mexico, Chile, Brazil, uh, Africa, whatever it is, or the racism in our own countries, be in solidarity with the people who are oppressed and learn from them and listen well, and let them really be your guide in many ways. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
I mean, it's the book is easy to read. It's beautiful. It's like some of the books make you very tired from reading. This is an easy book to read. It's an interesting book to read. It's very informative. It's entertaining. It's powerful. A part of people, I encourage everybody who's on this call, if you haven't read this book, get it and buy it. And if you have a loved one that you'd like just to give them a gift, even if it's not like somebody who's very much into Palestine, I would recommend that you recommend just buy this book and give it as a gift. It's a good book. But I think what might be excellent way of using the book is that people encourage their churches, their communities, maybe to do like a book study together. I mean, it is if people read the book together. I think that would be very powerful.
Yeah. The Jewish Voice for Peace are really progressive anti-Zionist Jewish movement. The Washington, D.C. JVP just used the book as a for their book club and did a reading. So I did a Zoom call. So yeah, I'd encourage that. And I mean, if you want, I can always zoom in at the end and answer your questions if I can. So yeah, I just encourage you to give the book away for Christmas. Consider starting a little book club, and you can complement it with other books as well, or chapters from other issues. So it's
Let's
a good.
focus on your book now, Don. Let's focus, don't to be humble. I mean, let's focus on your book. I think it would be really good and an opportunity because it's wonderful. Don is very accessible. I'm sure that you would be like it is maybe at the beginning or maybe at the end of the session. I'm sure you'll be more than happy to attend of these meetings and just engage with people, how people would react to the book. I think that's very important. And it's a new way of really, or it's a different way of addressing or educating people on issues that are happening in Palestine. And Palestine is in the news every week, and people are interested. And the book is an easy read and an excellent tool. So we really, I mean, that's part of community. Don mentioned that it is we need like when you join a cause, any cause around the world, you also join a community of people who care. And in a way, we support each other by using the tools that are available to spread the information. So I would suggest very much, we're hoping to do multiple launches of your book to use it. Maybe we could also have an online discussion, maybe like some of the chapters, at least, maybe not all of the chapters, but I know that there are multiple chapters that would be worth to have like special conversation among them. Don't want to spoil the book for people now.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe you and I can figure out how to do that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I'm just absolutely available, particularly if it's Zoom, and it's inexpensive way to do it. So I'm all for that.
And I mean, this month we're using the month of December. So today we spoke about glory to God in the lowest. Next week, Reverend Naeem has launched or one of his books, which is, I mean, it was released earlier this year. It is on religious extremism, but it really predicted what is happening in Israel today. So we have like 8 people who are going to present different sections in the book. So please don't miss next week. And on the 27th, we're having Javier Abu Eid, who's also a good friend of ours. Actually, when Don was in the country, we both attended a launching of his book in Birzeit about Palestinian Christians and their engagement in the struggle for the last 100 years. So please be prepared to buy multiple books this month. And we would encourage, I mean, I think we're going to be sending out for the people, if you have read the book or you're planning to buy the book, let us know, and maybe we could have like a closed meeting for the people who have read a book and do multiple chapters together with Don. Your book is available on Amazon, correct?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. You can get it directly from the publisher, Interlink. Just Google Interlink Books. And by the way, the publisher is Palestinian of Interlink Books, and they have a number. So, yeah.
Is that a
Amazon.
good thing or a bad thing, Don?
No, it's a good thing. He's very good. But also, I mean, it'll be out soon in digitally, so you can buy it digitally. So that's coming soon. It may be eventually in Spanish.
I remember,
or Arabic.
I remember in Palestine during the first Intifada, because it was illegal to have books that spoke about politics or issues. And we were little kids. But I remember when we were going to some people's houses, they used to and there was no like Xerox machines. They were illegal because that was like how the manashir, the statements, would be printed. So people used to hand copy them, actually, and to copy them by hand. I mean, it's like early times.
Oh, God. Wow.
I remember people who were copying books, and actually it was such a big privilege. It was like an honor for people to get engaged, because you get a chance to read the book, because there weren't many books that were handwritten. So we're not going to, you don't have to copy it by hand. Don's book is available online. You can have it. And Don, honestly, thank you on behalf of everybody who has been in this meeting. And on behalf of Sabil, Kumi, myself, thank you for being the wonderful person you are. Thank you for putting the time in writing the book and sharing the story. And thank you for being part of our story as Palestinians.
Well,
and we're happy that
I thank you. I mean, you've helped shape who I am. And it's been an exciting journey. And thank you all who have been on the call. You're part of the community. So let's just stay focused, and costly solidarity, as Kairos says, is really what we're called to. And that's the way of Jesus, the Hebrew prophets, peace be upon him, Muhammad, and so on. That's what we're called to do and be, and it makes life so much richer. So thank you, Omar, and everybody for being part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Don. And just a reminder, if you've read the book or you're planning to get the book, write us an email and we'll have a small study group of the book together, of the people who have read it or going to read it. And maybe like sometime in January, we'll have a session. Depends on how fast a reader you are. It's an easy book. You read it very fast. Thank you, friends, and see you next week. Next week is with Reverend Naeem and Samia and Cedar and many of the people who are the founders of Sabil on religious extremism. So please join us and see you soon, friends. Take care.
Okay, blessed Advent and Christmas to all.
And Happy New Year. Take care.